here. I'm glad you're here to listen to and learn from one of our friends here as past presenters. Her real name is Tatovic, but we call her Tato, and her last name is Gulyamiran. And she today is going to present to us lots of information about her homeland, which is Armenia. We've been looking forward to that for a long time, those of us on the Social Sciences Subcommittee. She's going to explain what remains of Armenia today, territorially and culturally. And that is going to be discussed with us, especially after this genocide, in which approximately 1 million citizens were killed by Ottoman paramilitary groups. And she will ask students to think about the many ways that Armenia has contributed to the global community. A little bit about her background. She earned her BA from Yerevan State University in Armenia. And I think she said that is the capital. And her MA and PhD degrees from Purdue University here in Indiana. She is an associate professor of Spanish at Hope. And she identifies with history, diversity, and will focus on these topics in the context of Armenia. And Tato, if you remind me, when is the next course you're teaching? Because I want people to know about that one too. It's August. Do you know your date?
August 4th on my calendar.
I think you're right. And Tato on August 4th is going to be presenting another course, this time through the Fine Arts Committee, about some of the beautiful artwork that has been created by her Armenian brothers and sisters. And so I would like to have you see if you can sign up for that one as well, because the registration is still open. And now I would like to have you say good afternoon and welcome to Tato, who is going to be speaking to us this afternoon. Thanks, Tato, for being here.
Thank you, Kit, and thank you, Susan, for having me. You know that I fell in love with the HASP community the first time I taught, and I'm so happy to be back. Thank you, everyone, for being here and for sharing your interest about Armenia. As Kit said, I am Armenian. I have been living in the United States for a little over 15 years, but the core of my heart is still Armenian, and culturally just my identity has been shaped by Armenia. So I'm very happy to be sharing a little bit about my country. You will see me sharing my screen, and I will share how I'm going to carry this presentation with you. So you will see my presentation slides here. What I'm going to do is walk you through some of the history of Armenia and just share with you some of its historical significance and about it right now. It's kind of treated as a crash course of Armenian history. And people here who know me know that I'm a history junkie, so I love everything that shapes the identity of people through history, right? How history shapes the identity of different nations and how culture plays a role. What you will see is that because Armenia has a very, very big history, very large and long, you will notice that I have little references on the top right corner of my slides, some of them, not all, just to give you a historical context of world-renowned events. So, so you can put everything in context. Let us begin. So I'm Armenian. My last name is Gulyamiran. How do you know if someone is Armenian? Their last names end in Y-A-N or I-A-N. This signifies that Y-A-N people are born in Armenia. I-A-N people are usually born in the diaspora. Armenia has a huge diaspora. What does Y-A-N or I-A-N mean? It means of. So of something. Gulyamiran means of the king of roses. My ancestor was a gardener, and he had a huge rose garden, and they used to call him the king of roses. And so his descendants started being called name, and then last name of the King of Roses. My last name is not usual at all. It's a very unique last name, even in Armenia. People ask me how to pronounce it, which I love because it kind of sets me apart everywhere I go. And most of the Armenian last names you will see have Christian references because I will get to Christian history of Armenia. So Armenia, what do we know about Armenia? Armenia is the small country in Europe. You will see it's at the easternmost end of Europe. Here, there's a little arrow to the country. Here is the flag of Armenia. It's red, blue, and orange. Red has two meanings. Either it's the blood spilled for our motherland, or it's the color of pomegranate, which is the national fruit of Armenia. Well, Armenia has several national fruits, pomegranate and apricots, because they abound in Armenia. Blue is the blue skies and the peaceful skies of Armenia. And orange is the wheat, which is the richness of Armenia. Armenia was a very agricultural country, has always been, and wheat is a national symbol. You can see this is the coat of arms of Armenia. You can see the wheat here, which is also what we have as a national symbol. Here is some feathers of birds. You can see the chain that's broken, which means independence, and the ribbon, which is like the new Armenia kind of a thing. The lion and eagle are the national kind of animals, like are symbols of the country. Why lion and eagle? Eagle represents the national symbol of Armenia from the pre-Christian kingdoms. Once Armenia adopted Christianity, most of the kings started using lion as national symbols. And so here having the lion and the eagle is kind of bringing that whole history together as kind of our protective stances for our national coat of arms, sorry. What you see on the shield here is also very interesting because it honors our past dynasties of kings. This is pre-Christian, well, some pre-Christian, some post-Christian. We had two kingdoms post-Christianity that used the lion as their kind of like the symbol. You see this one in the red ones, the lions have crosses. This is, of course, the symbol of Christianity. So two kings, Bagratuni and the Cilician Armenia, the Rubenid, the dynasties of kings, they used these as their national symbols. And then we have eagles, which was pre-Christianity, so before Christ, before 301, when Armenia adopts Christianity from the two kingdoms here, Artashisyan and the other king dynasty that Armenia had before. So these are kind of honoring all the kingdoms or the dynasties of kings that we had in Armenia. And in the middle, what you see is Mount Ararat. On top of it is Noah's Ark. And this is the flood water receding, so kind of exposing the mountain. So let's start with that, actually. This is something that we Armenians take pride of. A lot of countries and a lot of Armenians call our land Noah's Route. Why? Because we have biblical references that Noah, after the flood, found himself landed on Mount Ararat. Mount Ararat right now, unfortunately, is not in the territory of Armenia, but in the territory of Turkey. It is very visible from pretty much everywhere on the western part of Armenia near the capital city. And so it kind of reminds us of our biblical past when Noah landed on Ararat and descended from Ararat to form the community which later became Armenia. Here are some references from Genesis. Hopefully you read it, but if not, you probably have read it multiple times, probably not, but it's a good reference to have whenever we're thinking about Armenia and Ararat and the biblical references to this land. So what is Mount Ararat? Mount Ararat is Noah's kind of the cradle where civilization started according to Genesis, right? And after the flood, obviously, and it's visible from Yerevan, my hometown. Yerevan is the capital of Armenia. You can also see Ararat from many other places, but Yerevan, if you have a bright day, then, whoops, excuse me, this shouldn't have happened. If you have a clear day, then you will see Mount Ararat. So early Christian chroniclers believe that when Noah saw land after the flood, he exclaimed, Yerevat. Yerevat in Armenian means it appeared. So he and his family descended into Arat Valley to settle. Yerevat, Yerevan, the capital of Armenia, it lays in the valley that has views of Mount Arat from all angles. Now it's Mount Arat that appears to us from the distance. The big mountain that you see is called Masis, and the small one that you see is called Sis. And this is something that we treasure to have had as part of history, and we mourn not to have as part of our country. Because of these biblical references of how Noah started, kind of descended from Ararat, and civilization kind of spread from there on, a lot of maps depict Armenia as the paradise on earth. Here, this is one map that you can find in London. This is from 1780, and you can see that Armenia is depicted as paradise on earth, Eden on earth. You can also, if you have traveled to Italy, you've most probably seen something similar in the Vatican. They do have that depicted on the walls. Again, Armenia depicted as paradise because of this biblical reference of Noah landing on Mount Ararat. So we Armenians call ourselves Hai and Hayas. And the reason we do that is coming again from biblical times. What happens? According to the Chronicles, again, Christian Chronicles, Haik is the grandson of, or great-grandson of Noah, son of Japheth. After the flood, Noah's three sons actually, Japheth, Shem, and Ham, settled in the Arat region, and so they increased there. They kind of spread their roots. And then after the Tower of Babel, the Babylonian tower, collapsed, Haik, who was handsome for his handsome appearance, curly hair, right? He dominated the giants and the heroes, subdued those who defied him, and his followers were called Hai, and their country, Hayastan, the land of Hai. So our country, we don't call it Armenia. Most other international communities call it Armenia, but we Armenians call our country Hayastan, which means land of Hai, the people who are descendants of Haik, the great-grandson of Noah. However, there are many historians that base their evidence of why we call our country Hayastan on Sumerian and Hittite inscriptions. They claim that the country is named after god Haya. And it is true, there was a god Haya, and the very first kingdom that preceded the kingdom of Armenia known internationally was the kingdom of Ararat, and the god was god Haya. So Haya, Hayasa means Armenians here, Haya here, Hai here, comes from god Haya. So there are these two legend, history, and people can believe whichever we want. We in schools are mostly taught the history of Haik, so kind of the descendants of Haik, the great-grandchild. Here you see Haik. This is actually very close to where my parents live. We can walk here. I really love seeing this statue. And in the video, you're kind of seeing different moments of Haik and his battles. So we say Haik, Hayastan, Armenia. What's its historical value? What do people think when they say Armenia or Armenian highlands? Armenian highlands is a very, very broad kind of area, but Armenia itself is tiny right now. Well, we'll get to that, but you can see here how huge it is. It's between the Black and the Caspian and the Mediterranean seas, and it was called Armenia from sea to sea. Some point of history, it was bigger than this, but we'll get to that point. So basically, when we talk about Hayastan, the descendants of Haik, we're thinking of this huge area, and this is a modern map. You will see that it includes many countries that are different territories right now, and this has shifted a lot throughout the history. So let's begin at the beginning. Let's start when people of Hai have been referenced in history. And again, Hai, Armen, Hayastan, Armenia. Why is there this difference between Armenians calling themselves Hai and Hayastan and international community calling Armenia Armen and Armenia? So early mentions of Hai people were found in Hittite inscriptions, which are dating back to the 2nd millennium before Christ. And then later we have Greek fragments as Hai creatures, the people of Hai people, right? And then the term Armenian was probably first mentioned in the 6th century before Christ. And it was originally denoted to the Hai people by the scribes of Darius, the king of Persia. So he supposedly have gotten the reference from Babylonian inscriptions referring to the Hayasa as the highlands of Armenia. Hayasa again, referring to the god Haya, Hayasa, this is Haya. Herodotus, in his history books in the next century, so 5th century BC, he refers to Armenia and Armenians, where he observes that Armenians are polai probatoi, which means they have a lot of animals. It's a rich area of animals. So while Armenians in Armenia call themselves Hai, again, deriving from Haik, others call them Armenians, deriving from the powerful king whose name was Arame. So the people of Arame in Armenian would mean Aramen or Armen, right? And so the neighboring countries started calling this Armen people, Armeni, Armenia, and now it has become more accepted as Armenians and Armenia, Armenians. So people of Arame and the country of Arame. Here you see various pictures and depictions of Sumerian, Hittite, kings, and different inscriptions that you can find when Armenia has become part of like written chronicles and has been mentioned in different. Again, pay attention to what is happening in the world at that same time to kind of give you a reference of where we are in the point of our world history. So Armenia apparently is one of the earliest states, but it has history even dating before the state kind of like tribal kind of times, like Stone Age, Iron Age, all of that. Armenia boasts of a lot of the firsts of the world, like kind of first things that we find that we ascribe to civilization, right? So we have war horses that date back to 4,500 years. We have depictions of agriculture that date back to 7,500 years. We have tools over 300,000 years old. And so like we have so many different things that depicts that the people here were rich in agriculture. They did a lot of agronomical work, agricultural work, animal husbandry, everything. So like it was very well developed in this area, even before the mentions of Hayasa and Armenia appear in what we have preserved in the chronicles. One of the fun things that I always like showing is the oldest shoe. It's actually really cool. It's what you would imagine it to be. I have seen it with my own eyes. It is in the Museum of Armenia, the History Museum of Armenia. They found it recently. Another recent big discovery was the winemaking facility, which is one of the oldest in the world. So Armenians are actually known to be one of the very first winemakers in the world. We have many winemaking facilities around the country and around the historical parts of the country that kind of direct us to thinking that Armenians were one of the earliest winemakers. So we were very peaceful hunter-gatherers. Then in around like 5th millennium before Christ, with the rise of neighboring powers, a military state was more than necessary. So that's what it became. And then kind of it became more and more combined into like a state with a law and with a government and all of the structures. So let's talk about the first kingdom of Armenia. The kingdom is called Urartu or Ararat. You will find both references. Why Urartu and why Ararat? This is in Sumerian, so this is not Armenian alphabet, right? And here what they have is that they omit the vowels, and people, when they decipher, they have different options of deciphering it, so we don't exactly know what it would be. We infer from the consonants. So Urartu is accepted and Ararat is accepted. Both of them are, but Ararat makes just more sense because of the Mount Ararat that's also in that area. And so people are now referencing more as Mount Ararat. We have no way of knowing, of course, this is centuries before Christ, so we do not know. So let's reference it, Kingdom of Ararat. And again, you will find Kingdom of Urartu and Kingdom of Ararat in different history books. They're the same thing. What happens? There is one king. It's not the first king. It's after several kings. King Argishti builds the city of Erebuni. The city is built in 782 before Christ. And the name of Erebuni has changed throughout time. It went from Erebuni, kind of evolved to Erevan, and now it has become Yerevan. That is the capital of Armenia. It is the oldest capital in the world, and it is older than Rome by 29 years. Here on the upper corner, you will see the inscription when the city was founded. And it says, I have a note, so I'm going to read it here. I obviously can't read this. It says, by the greatness of God Haya. Again, the same God Haya, Haya stuff. By the greatness of God Haya, son of Menua, built this mighty stronghold and proclaimed it Erebuni for the glory of the country of Ararat and for holding the enemy's countries in awe. By the greatness of God Haya, Argishti, the son of Menua, mighty king of country of Ararat, ruler of the town of Tushpa. So we know that Argishti, the king of the country of Ararat, the kingdom of Ararat, built this in the name of God Haya and named the city Erebuni. What we have now is what has become of it, the city of Yerevan, the capital of Armenia. What the structure looks right now, not much has remained of it. We do have kind of the blueprint of it. We do have much of it, but we do not have the whole kind of the whole thing left. But Yerevan is 2,802 years old. And when I think about my city, every time I visit it, it's so old and at the same time so new. We even have a song, My Yerevan, so old yet so new. You always forget that you're in the oldest capital city in the world and how much the city has seen before it came to be in front of our eyes, before we came to experience. So this is the actual picture of what it looks like now. There is obviously a museum next to it. I didn't take all of the pictures, but I did want to show you several other depictions of Erebuni by different people in different countries. So these are different depictions of Erebuni, and you can obviously see Mount Ararat in the background. Here you see King Argishti. This is a little newer, so this is more modern, contemporary depiction of the fortress of Erebuni and Mount Ararat in the background. And most of them depict kind of like this great leader leading his people towards kind of like this victorious view of Argishti and his city and of course his country. Let's fast forward. This is 6th century before Christ. Let's go to 1st century before Christ and let's see what notable events happen in Armenia. So various kings come and go. Armenia has already been renamed from Ararat to Armenia and is known in the international community as Armenia. The kingdom is known Kingdom of Armenia. The biggest and the greatest king of all time in Armenia ruled from 95 before Christ to 55 before Christ. So imagine that. It's over 2,000 years ago that the greatest king of Armenia ruled over Armenia. His name is Tigran. In English, a lot of the people say Tigranes because of the Greeks referencing to Greeks and Romans. But Tigran the Great is what we call our mightiest king. What did he do? He actually annexed a lot of the neighboring parts to Armenia, and you can see it's the biggest it has ever been. So they're vassal states, they are briefly vassal states. You'll notice even Jerusalem was a vassal state of Armenia at that time. Here, I don't know if you could see the colors and what is written here. It kind of shows the different parts of Armenia, not only Tigran the Great, but also before and after him. But this is what it looked like when Tigran the Great was the king. After that, it has only been getting small, so that is the bad news. But so after Tigran the Great, let's jump to Christianity, because I think that's the next very notable event of Armenia. So here you see three people. You see King Abgar, king of Yedessia, married to Herine, or in English, Helen. She's queen of Armenia. Here you see two apostles, Bartholomew, and here you see Thaddeus. Right? These are the apostles that actually traveled to Armenia and took a big part of the Christianization of Armenia. So let's start with Abgar. Abgar the fifth was king of Yedessia, married to Herine, Helen, of Armenia. She's Herine Arshakuni. This is the dynasty, the king. She's the queen of Armenia, and she was ill. This is around the time that Bartholomew and Thaddeus, they are walking around spreading Christianity, and he learns about this, cures him and her in the name of Jesus, and Abgar becomes the first Christian king in the world. He immediately converts. He thinks this is a miracle, and so he becomes Christian. He asks them to baptize him, and he becomes a Christian king. Now, there is also a legend, I don't know how true this could have been, but there is a legend that he had a correspondence with Jesus after his healing. And so that is why he was so awakened to Christianity and so in awe by it. So he sends Bartholomew and Thaddeus to convert all of the Armenians to Christianity. He thinks that all Armenians should be Christians and Armenia should become a Christian state. Of course, the conversion process was very slow. They faced a lot of resistance. Armenia was a pagan country. They had their kings. It was kind of like the Greeks, right? Greeks and Romans, we had king of war, queen of, I don't know, fertility, et cetera, et cetera. So there was a lot of resistance, but that they managed to convert many people in their lifetime and establish this Christian legacy in Armenia, which in 301 adopts Christianity as the state religion. Armenia becomes the first Christian country in the world. So 301 is when we have the first Christian country in the world, and that country is Armenia. How does this happen with all the resistance that's happening? A key role was played by Saint Gregory the Illuminator. Saint Gregory was a devout Christian in a pagan country. Here you see the temple. This temple is still alive and well. You can see it in the village of Garni in Armenia. And you can see that it has this Greco-Roman influence. And it was the favorite worship place of the king of Armenia at that time, Dardat or Tiridates III. So what happens? Saint Gregory the Illuminator is spreading Christianity, and Tiridates or Dardat hates that. He doesn't like that, so he sends Gregory the Illuminator to prison. He is imprisoned for 12 years. The area of his imprisonment is still preserved. This is this small room. It looks big in the picture. In reality, it's a room where you can't lay down very well. It's tiny. And so Saint Gregory the Illuminator lived here for 12 years because he was trying to spread Christianity. Now, in that spot where he was imprisoned is a church. The church is called Khor Vidap, which is like the deep pit named after this pit where Saint Gregory the Illuminator was imprisoned. And again, you can see Mount Ararat in the background. It's kind of protecting this very Christian, very holy space. So 12 years of imprisonment. So how does he succeed to get out of prison? Armenia is facing a very difficult time in history at this time, because while Gregory the Illuminator is imprisoned, the Roman Emperor Diocletian, you see him here, he invades Armenia. Armenians and Romans were big foes. They were enemies and they would fight each other a lot. So Diocletian invades Armenia and conquers significant territories. Tiridates III, he loses his sanity. He's depressed. He's sick. He's just like mentally, psychologically overwhelmed. The chroniclers, the historians say that he loses his sanity. I think it was more like depression, and he cannot do anything. He's bedbound. So people persuade him that, all right, you gotta act. Romans are invading. They're getting too much territory. So we need to do something about it. And I have a cure for you. Let's call Gregory the Illuminator, because he will magically cure you, we promise. Just please let's get St. Gregory the Illuminator here. So he does, he agrees, and he cures him. Turdat thinks that this is some sort of magic, a miracle. And he asks him, what is this? And he said, I cured you with the word of Jesus. And Turdat asks to be baptized by St. Gregory the Illuminator himself. So here you see the moment of baptism of Turdat, the King Turdat III. So Gregory baptizes Turdat III in 301, and the king declares Armenia a Christian state. So now Armenia is a Christian state, surrounded by a lot of pagans, which was not received very well. But let me tell you the story of the very first Christian church that you will find in Armenia. Again, this is still available for everyone to visit with the museum. You can even find part of Noah's Ark in the museum that they say they have discovered on Mount Ararat. This was built in 303 AD. It's called Echmiadzin. Echmiadzin is an Armenian word that signifies descent of only begotten. This is the first Armenian church and the seat of the Armenian Catholicus. And why did they decide to build this here is because Gregory the Illuminator, he saw light coming down and kind of like hammering down this place, and he had a vision, and it said, this is where he will descend. So that is why it was kind of, they believed that it was God's word, that he wanted the very first church to be built in this very spot. So they built this church. It is still there, the seat of the Catholicus. With Christianity came a very different culture, and this culture is very unique in the world. You won't see this anywhere else, but one of this very unique Armenian Christian things is khachkar. Khachkar literally means cross stone. So what are these? These are tombstones, and all the Christian Armenians were buried in these, and then these tombstones were used as their kind of gravesite. We have ones dating back to the 4th century, so you will see tombstones everywhere in Armenia. Now they're more cultural, they're more like kind of a Christian staple thing for Armenia. In fact, we have an Armenian khachkar maker who made a khachkar for us, Hope people. If you want to see one in real life, you can just walk to the Krasinga Art Museum right behind me in Martha Miller, and there is a red khachkar that you will see. This is what khachkars look like now. Obviously, these ones that you see here are very, very old heritages that are left. The more prominent the person, the more ornate the khachkar, and so on. There is not one single khachkar that is like another one. So these are all different from each other. There are millions of them across Armenia. And of course, because khachkar is so uniquely Armenian, this is also a cultural staple. And because of our neighboring countries, and we'll get to that soon, this is a cultural threat, because this shows indigeneity of Armenians of this entire area of Armenian highlands that I showed you. So what do? They destroy the khachkars. And in the area that is now in Azerbaijan. It's called Nakhichevan. Nakhichevan is an Armenian word. It means the place of first descent. This is where Noah descended. But now it's under the control of Azerbaijan. It was given to them by Stalin during the Soviet times, and they systemically erased every single trace of Armenian existence. There are no Armenians left in Nakhichevan. They're all either massacred or exiled. And Nakhichevan was actually home of the biggest cemetery of Armenians. 20,000 plus khachkars were there. In 2005, they just they equaled it to ground, and they have blown up all the churches there, everything that would signify that Armenians are indigenous to this place, anything from 4th century, even before. Kathy, the Armenian cross stone can be seen at Hope campus. So if you go to Kruzinga Art Museum, right between Kruzinga and Kreisinga, maybe I'm saying the word right? The Kreisinga Art Museum and Dupree Art Gallery, there is a khachkar. So you will see it. It's a red stone, very typical stone from Armenia, and you will be able to see it. All right, so that about khachkars. Another very notable thing about Armenian culture and Christian culture is the Bibles. We have a lot of Bibles in Armenia, and they are handwritten Bibles. Hope College is rich. We have an Armenian Bible that we cannot decide what century it was written. If you go to our Van Wylen Library rare books section, you will see an Armenian Bible. I have asked experts from pictures, of course, they can't come here and see it by themselves, but from the pictures that I have taken, we think that it is a 14th century Bible. The Bible says 1848, though. So we think that either an Armenian came to Holland with the first settlers, or it was given to some Dutch settler to come here. And it was kind of like a beautiful gift to bring here. We don't know, but it's something beautiful to have an Armenian Bible in Van Wylen. And the country that destroyed the Armenian cross stones is called Azerbaijan. And the area where it is called Nakhichevan. I will write that down here because Nakhichevan is difficult to pronounce. Azeris changed the name and they called it Nakhchivan, which Nakhichevan is an Armenian word, means the first place of descent. Nakh, first place of descent, Ijevan. So how do we write all these Bibles? Armenia had its first alphabet. Armenian language has been a language for a very, very, very long time, as you could see. But the first time that the written alphabet is introduced is in 405 AD. The person who wrote alphabet is named Mestop Mashtot. Oh, by the way, Ots also is of Mashtots, right? So, and here we can see his statue. The building behind that you see is called Matenadaran. It means book depository. It has the oldest Bible, it has the smallest Bible, it has the biggest Bible in the world, all Armenian Bibles that have been written. We have so many Bibles that have been lost in the history because of the genocide. I'll get to that. Because of the invasions. And we have so many stories and chronicles of priests. And these Bibles are huge, heavy, with priests carrying it. So to have this many Bibles preserved is a miracle. And we have so many different styles, different ornaments. I would love to get into this, but this is a bit too much into the arts. How does there happen to be an Armenian stone on the Hope campus? I think that, I don't know the history very well, but I think it was in 2016. I think with Hope's relation with the Christian history and the historic Christian faith, and Armenia being the first nation, I think that has to do with it. We also had Armenian professors who, Armenian descent, right? Professors of Armenian descent who helped with that. And this person was commissioned. He actually works from Armenia and has done cross stones from for a lot of different places. And so we are lucky to have one here, but I can dig a little deeper and see why exactly we have this cross stone. I think that there was this kind of commission coming from people of Christian faith and of Armenian descent. All right, let's fast forward a lot. So let's jump from 400 to 19th century. How about that? What happens during this period? Wars, a lot of wars. Why? Because Armenia is of a very big geographic importance. We cannot have a break even now. Why? This is where the crossroads are between Asia and Europe, and Silk Road went through Armenia. All the gas pipes are going through this area. All the big roads are going through this area, from China to India to Iran to Russia to Europe to the Mediterranean, and so on, so on and so forth. So any invasions that came through us. We had Arab invasions, Mongol invasions, Ottoman invasions. So what happens? Between 1500 and 1918, Armenia loses its independence in 1375. Last king of Armenia actually rules until 1375. And then after that, the state is still a state, but not a state quite, so it kind of falls decline. But between 1500 and 1918, Armenia keeps gaining and losing independence. It's a very unstable state, and constant wars, Russo-Persian War, Turkish War, and so many wars that happen in the territory of Armenia. And so what Armenia is seeing is just instability. We lose our independence to Ottomans, to Persians, to Russians. We're under their rule, constantly changing every so many years. And during these centuries, the political movement that wants to permanently free Armenia of these rulers, especially Ottoman rulers, is becoming to be known in the world as the Armenian question. Why do we want to free ourselves from the Ottoman rulers more than the Persians and the Russians? Relatively speaking, under Russian and Persian rules, there was some sort of peace, right? Peace and coexistence. I mean, this is relative. Peace and coexistence under a different culture, under a different rule, is never perfect, but at least there wasn't persecution. Active persecution wasn't as prominent. Ottoman Empire was a complete different picture. It was a very difficult time for us, and Armenians really needed to free themselves from the Ottomans if we wanted to be free. So what do Ottomans do? Ottomans actually impose a lot of their culture on Armenians, and it's very difficult because what you see here is, for example, an Armenian wedding. But you can see that men are wearing some sort of Ottoman hats. Women are covering their faces. That was not necessarily the truth of Armenian culture. We're Christians, right? So they had different, I'm not saying that we never covered it in the history, yes, but it was just different traditions that we had. However, Armenians never gave up their Christianity. Being Christian was like the core of our identity. The Armenian alphabet and language was the core of our identity because it has persevered through so many centuries and through so many empires and countries and rulers and so on and so forth. And here you can see, although they comply with some of the things, you see a Bible here. You see it's probably some sort of a church. Most of the churches in the Ottoman Empire right now are in destitute situations. They're either blown up, they don't exist, you can't place them on the map anymore, or they are just ruins in terrible condition. But here in this other picture is also something that you can notice. Here is a picture of a family, Again, you can see the Ottoman hats, and you can see the cloaks that they had to wear, so something like that was imposed on them. But again, Armenians are never giving up on their Christian identity. The boy is showing a little shirt here that has a cross. And I don't know if you can see from there, there is a rosary in this guy's hands. So again, Armenians are true to their identity, although there are so many hardships that they are experiencing in the Ottoman rule. The most difficult time for Armenians in the Ottoman Empire probably started late 1800s. Armenians were very different from Turks, very, very different. Christian, obviously, very devout. And they had a big aristocracy, very close connections to Europe and Russia. And Turks hated that. They hated that. Here you can see how Armenians looked in their families, in their houses. So they had their own ways. And you probably noticed this was how most Europeans, most Russians dressed this period, but not the Turks. So it didn't sit well with the Turkish people. So beginning late 19th century, the Ottomans had enough of this Christian population, namely Armenians in the center, east and south. And then they hated the Greeks in the north side of the empire, and they just wanted to be done with them. In 1890, there is this sultan, and his name was Abdul Hamid II, and he started this movement of this, we're Turkish, this is our identity. So like their huge Turkish identity was being built around this time. Actually, the current governor or the current president of Turkey refers too many times back to Sultan Abdul Hamid, which is very concerning for people who know history, any history of the Turkish world. But anyways, so he said, I will soon settle those Armenians. I will give them a box on the ear, which will make them relinquish their revolutionary ambitions. And what were the revolutionary ambitions of Armenians? They wanted to keep their language. They wanted to be able to practice their religion, just like any person who has any identity wants to stay true to that identity. Turks hated that. And so the taxes were astronomically high. Armenians paid maybe like 50 to 100 times more taxes than any other citizen of the Ottoman Empire. And so it was really affecting the Armenians there. And so in the 1890s, a little around that time, there were the massacres that are called Hamidian Massacres. A bunch of Armenians were massacred and left the Ottoman Empire because of this persecution. This, however, is nothing compared to what happened during World War I. In 1914, World War I breaks out. And Ottoman Empire is allied with Germany, the Austro-Hungarian Empire, and they're the allies, right? So they are fighting the Gallipoli Battle, which if you know any Turkish history, this is the biggest battle in their history that they will reference to a lot. Why? Because this was one of the most significant battles where everyone, Russia, France, England, and so on and so forth, they came to this city, which is a city close to the sea, and they fought and fought and fought and fought because of the oil railway. This battle lasted more than a year, was completely devastating. Over 250,000 people died on each side. And then the attackers were like, all right, we can't do this. We're going to withdraw. And so Turkish people claimed victory. And this is one of the biggest victory because they kind of couldn't cross into what is now Turkey. But this is a perfect time to do something that the Turks have been wanting to do a lot. So on April 24th, in 1915, Gallipoli Battle is going on. What they did is they surrounded the intelligentsia of the Ottoman Empire, the Armenians. So here you see pictures of writers, musicians, people who served in the government, and they are Armenians, very outspoken, but very true to the Ottoman Empire. So Grigor Sohrab, he's in here as well. He's an Armenian writer. He was an Armenian writer, very true to Talyat Pasha. Talyat was one of the perpetrators. And when they told him, they were like, this is going to happen. He said, this is impossible. He's my friend. He was one most brutally killed. What did they got? The heads of the states, right? The brains of the Armenian people, the most prominent representatives of the Armenians in the Ottoman Empire. They killed them in most brutal ways on April 24th, 1915, and they showcased parts of their body. It might get graphic, I'm sorry. In public. So there are pictures. I obviously put this picture, but these were the people that were killed. So April 24th, 1915 is what we commemorate as the Armenian Genocide Day. It wasn't a day. It was a very, very long time. And if you ask me, it hasn't ended because these desires that the Turkish government has have not receded. And we saw that in 2020, and we'll refer to that as well. So when we say Armenian genocide, what is it? Here in this map, you will see what happened between 1915 and 1923. So here's what Armenia is now, and here is where Armenians lived. The big dots that you see are the biggest places where Armenian people were massacred. They were either massacred or exiled, deported. So they were deported. And my family comes from Van, and a city that's called Mush here. And my mother's side comes from a city called Adıyaman here. So my father's side is descendants of genocide survivors, and my mother's father's side is also descendants of genocide survivors. So I'm coming from around this area on both sides. I have never been to my ancestral homes. They are not anymore, unfortunately, have been destroyed in every trace of it, and I cannot trace back a lot. And it's the most frustrating thing to try to do Armenian genealogy because I don't know, everything is burnt, everything is destroyed, and so you don't see, you can't trace back your own history. You can't really put the puzzle of your own identity together, which is really frustrating enough. So a lot of the Armenians were marched to the Deir el-Zor desert, which is in Syria now. And of course, they were famished and died on the way. And those who made it were killed. And they were saying that they're just resettling because they're going to build these railways. People could not resist. How many people ask, how is this possible? How is it possible that people didn't resist? Well, they tried. They tried. Well, first, Armenians were not allowed to carry any weapons by law. So if you carried weapons, you would be executed. So they didn't have anything to protect themselves. That was one of the things. Second, they got all the men and all the capable people, arrested them and killed them, and they marched women and children and elderly. And so they were helpless, and they couldn't do anything about it. What happens in the world? Obviously, this has to come out, right? Actually, the United States had a very, very good ambassador in the Ottoman Empire, and he kept telling the United States government, this is happening, this is something that the United States is morally obliged to do to stop this. But the United States was in World War I. It was in the war, so it couldn't do anything about it. Actually, the United States didn't do anything about it until the recent recognition of the genocide by Joe Biden this very year. But here you see different American press referring to it. There are millions and millions of these kinds of things that you can see that were written by, I don't know, the New York Times and Washington Post and Boston Globe, et cetera, et cetera. People knew it. Countries were aware of it. It was during World War I. There was no way that Armenians were going to get any help. There were humanitarian projects, of course. Americans did help a lot with humanitarian missions. So taking people to orphanages or giving refuge to some Armenians in the United States was was a big thing. So you will see that a lot of Armenians, descendants of survivors of the genocide settled in the Boston area. We have a lot of descendants of survivors in the Detroit area as well. There is a big Armenian community. So the United States did help the survivors a lot. But helping the survivors doesn't stop a crime. What happens? The crime becomes a blueprint for another crime. And so what happened to Armenians became the blueprint for Hitler. And what did he do? Here you have an English translation of something that he said. Here's the reference to where you can find it. His decision to attack Poland was arrived at last spring, he says. And he says, I have issued the command that, et cetera, that I'm going to do this. And with the orders to send them to death mercilessly and without compassion, men, women, and children of Polish derivation and language. Only thus shall we gain the living space which we need. Who, after all, speaks today of the annihilation of the Armenians? And so Hitler based what he was going to do on the Armenian genocide. And we know the after effects of that. And then we know what happened to the Jewish people of Poland, Germany, Austria, and other countries around. So what did the world do about it? There was the Genocide Convention in 1948. Many people think that the Genocide Convention was adopted after the Holocaust committed by the Nazi. Actually, the person, Raphael Lemkin, he's Polish. The guy who coined the term genocide, he coined it because he learned about what happened to Armenians. And here is a story from his school, a class that he had in history. His professor taught about the Armenians being killed by the Turks. And he asked, but why do they kill them? And they were like, well, he kind of gave the reasons and said they were Christians, and the Turks wanted to be like a homogeneous state without the Christians and to claim all that territory where Armenians have historically been, and just to not have any Armenians around. There is Armenophobia. That's their whole identity. That's how their state was formed, right? And so the guy says, but why didn't Armenians, why couldn't they do anything about it? Why didn't anyone do anything about it? And they're like, all right, here's why anyone didn't do anything about it. Imagine you have a farm and there are chicken living in your farm. You're not chicken, you're different, right? But they're in your farm. And so you decide that you don't want any more chicken. So you go and kill all your chicken. And so no one could do anything about it. And Lemkin looked at his teacher and said, the humans are not chicken. And so he was very affected about it. And he decided that he's going to do everything to make sure that there is an international law that will prohibit people from killing other people. And he used the Greek words, genocide, like the killing of the genome, and he loosely kind of ascribed it to any sort of ethnic cleansing, any sort of intentional killing and massacring of an ethnos is genocide. So that's what we had in 1948. Hasn't done much, obviously. We have seen more genocides since then, and you guys know that right now we're seeing many as well. And then the Tigray people in Ethiopia, here in China, and so in the world, unfortunately, it's not doing as much as it could do. Armenians, I'm answering the question of Norma in chat. Armenians were seen as revolutionary, but that was not the only reason. Armenians were Christians, Armenians were indigenous to that land, and Armenians had national and state ideology. And so it was very hard. Same with Greeks and Assyrians. And so it wasn't just Armenians. 1.5 million people, 1.5 million people, Armenians died because of the genocide. So 1.5 million people died from Armenian side. About 500,000, so 500,000 Greeks were massacred, and about 250,000 of Assyrians were massacred. So Armenians were not the only people during this time who were massacred. They were the biggest they were the people that saw the biggest hit, first because there were more Armenians living in the Ottoman Empire because of the territorial kind of how it functioned, and because there is still a lot of hatred toward Armenians and Greeks in Turkey. If you have ever heard of the terrorist organization that's called Grey Wolves, if you follow anything that's going between Turkey and Syria right now, the occupied territories of Syria by Turks, they bring this Grey Wolf ideologies into Syria and the occupied territory of Syria and the Kurdish part of Syria as well. They teach it, and this organization is formed because anti-Armenian, anti-Greek ideology, and it is like no Armenian, no Greek people should be in this world kind of a thing. And it's banned in some countries, not in the United States. It's banned in France, for example. There have been talks about banning this organization in Germany. It hasn't gone through yet, but the sentiment is still there, unfortunately, because of impunity. Of course, because of impunity. To this date, the Turkish government denies that genocide ever happened. That is correct. And they are engaged in changing the history and turning the tables. And if you read a little bit of Turkish written and Turkish propaganda, so state propaganda is a huge thing right now in Turkey. So the state propaganda will say that Armenians were actually turning against the Turks and siding with Russians, and so the Turks had to protect themselves. And so this was also during the World War, and Turkey and Russia were enemies, and so this had to be done, right? You just don't say that. This is not true, first of all, and second, you just don't kill someone because they didn't side with you. It's just not how things work. So you will see a lot of denial literature that is published by state-sponsored academic circles. And there is these think tanks, even in the United States, even in the US academic institutions, there are these sponsored academic circles that would deny Armenian genocide. In some countries, it's illegal to deny Armenian genocide. It's kind of like the Holocaust. You cannot deny the Holocaust. You cannot deny the Armenian genocide. Again, France is a good example because France has been taking these steps very seriously, and in France, it's actually considered extremism if you deny the Armenian genocide. They would question you for potential connection to this Grey Wolves organization. What do we do to commemorate genocide? Every single year, we go to the Genocide Memorial in Yerevan. A video will play where you will see people marching. It starts at 12 a.m. Midnight, turn of the day, April 24th. And that is the day that we remember our ancestors and pay tribute to them in the memorial. We come here, there is fire, it never is off, it's always on. We call it eternal fire. And we put flowers to commemorate what happens to us and our ancestors. You will hear often, many Armenians will say, every single one of us is a descendant of a survivor of the genocide. And so every single one of us carries this historic memory, and you cannot get away from it. It's part of who we are, and we have rebuilt after that. Now, here is from 2020. It was during the pandemic, and people were not allowed to go to the Genocide Memorial in person, which was a huge shock for Armenians because we do go, we march and go put our flowers and say our prayers there. But because of COVID, no one was allowed to go. And so they did this beautiful ceremony where you could text the names of your ancestors, and it would be projected on the walls of Titerna Kabert. Here is a big kind of statue. You will see the two parts of it. I don't know if the picture is good enough on your side, on your end of this presentation, but the big one is the big Armenia, the greater Armenia, and the small part signifies the smaller Armenia, which is what we lost after Tigranes the Great, the greatest king of Armenia. And the kind of the stones that come together represent the states of Armenia back at that time, back during the genocide. And so, yeah, people march and go walking from the center, downtown Yerevan, to Ditermakabert, which is quite a walk. And they pay their tribute. These are the flags of the countries that have recognized genocide. Actually, an interesting fact is that the very first country in the world who recognized the Armenian genocide was not Armenia, because Armenia was part of the Soviet Union at that time, and it was forbidden to talk about it. The first country that recognized the Armenian genocide was Uruguay in South America. And Armenia was the second country to recognize its own genocide. And the reason behind it is because of the Soviet Union and the limitations and restrictions. In fact, Ditermakabert was not built until like 50 or 60 years after the genocide, because Armenians were not allowed to do that under the Soviet rule. So let's talk a little bit about the Soviet rule, independence and Soviet rule. I think it would be fitting to think about these. So again, you can see the Greater Armenia, you can see the Lesser Armenia that I just talked about, one of those stones that you saw. What happened to Armenia? We came from here to this yellow little dot. And the reasons behind it were many, but the genocide really well, first of all, it wiped off all the Armenian population from here. There are very few people remaining in what is now Turkey, because they're constantly persecuted. In fact, an Armenian journalist was killed, Hrant Dink. If you Google his name, I can write it in chat. He was killed because he was Armenian and because he was speaking the truth. He was murdered by a Turkish 17-year-old Grey Wolf organization member, a nationalist. So these sentiments are very well and alive in Turkey. Unfortunately, Armenians are not safe in Turkey. There is one parliamentary member of the Turkish parliament right now, whose name is Garo Palyan, and he is constantly threatened, and they are trying to take away immunity from minority representatives, and that way they can be persecuted. And you know what that means. So I didn't want that. Oh, I didn't want that. There we go. Let's talk about the independence of Armenia. So what happened? World War I ends. A lot of countries start becoming independent. So Armenia claimed independence from the Ottomans and Russians. Part of Armenia was ruled by Russians, part of Armenia was ruled by the Ottomans, and after World War I, Armenia gains independence. This is actually where the Independence Bill was signed. This is the window where people came and put the Armenian flag out, says Independence Decree signed, we're independent, and this was the first government building. Unfortunately, right now it looks like this, and I hate the look of it because our beautiful people were not able to preserve history, and now there was a pizzeria. Now it's not a pizzeria anymore, but it used to be a pizzeria about 5 years ago. Who does that to a historic government building? So anyways, Armenians are independent only for 2 years. Why? Because Bolsheviks invade Armenia from the north, Turks invade Armenia from the west. Armenia loses a bunch of territory, and I'll show you how much. This was what independent Armenia looked like when we gained independence in 1918. And this is what remained after the invasions. So what happens? Bolsheviks invade, Turks invade, Azeris invade from the east, and so Armenians are like, listen, we cannot do this anymore. We're so weak. And imagine coming out of genocide, having invasions from all sides of the country. Armenians said, we are surrendering to the Bolsheviks, kind of, right? It wasn't exactly with those kind of terms, but surrendered to Bolsheviks. We said we will join the Soviet Union. So Armenia becomes part of the Soviet Union, and the Sovietization of Armenia starts happening. So what you will see in Armenia between like the 1922 until the end of the 20th century is lots of Soviet propaganda, lots of Sovietization, Lenin and Stalin. You can see their statues in the Republic Square. You probably know a lot about the Soviet history. Their churches being closed. Everyone has to be an atheist. In fact, the church where I got married in Armenia, in Yerevan, is the oldest remaining church of Yerevan. It's not the oldest church that there ever was in Yerevan, but the oldest remaining because a lot were destroyed. This church was preserved during the Soviet times and was unveiled recently, several years ago. It was built in 1233, and it's a small church. I can show the picture later after this talk, but you can see gunshots on the church. You can just relive the history through looking at that church. But what the Armenians did to preserve that, because churches were not allowed, or they were closed, they were repurposed to become factories and machine building and stuff. They built a building around it and covered it inside a building so that church is not noticed and is not destroyed. And so it became like the science center, which was the building of that area, to be able to save it from the Soviets. You can see that the symbol of Armenia, which is Mother Armenia, there used to be a statue of Stalin, and Stalin was terrible for Armenia. Why was he terrible for Armenia? Because when we became part of the Soviet Union, Stalin was like, all right, let's repurpose all this land or this territory, and let's give it to this, let's give it to that. And so these are all the new forming states that were not states before. And he's like, let's purpose, this is friendship, this is brotherhood. And so why post-Soviet countries or former Soviet countries are still in a lot of conflicts, territorial claims, is because of this. So let me go back to this map here. Nakhichevan, the place where I mentioned that had all of the any Armenian trace erased from it, both people and structures and the biggest cemetery, is this one. It was given to Azerbaijan by Stalin. Same with Artsakh, which is here. It was given to Azerbaijan by Stalin in 1923. So it was never part of independent Azerbaijan. Azerbaijan never had territorial claims to these countries, and then suddenly Stalin comes and decides what is what, who is where. Same story with Crimea. You've probably heard a lot about Crimea between Russia and Ukraine. Same story in a lot of different countries. All former Soviet countries have some sort of territorial conflicts because of this redistribution of land. So anyway, Soviet years go by, and in 1988, Armenia sees an earthquake. This earthquake completely razes the northern part of Armenia. There are more than 25,000 people killed, more than 100,000 of homes destroyed, people homeless. But I think that kind of shows who Armenians really are as a community is in this last bullet point. There was not a single kid that went to an orphanage. Every single kid that lost a parent was adopted. So no orphaned kid after this earthquake. This earthquake was devastating. I was actually born in 1988 in the north of Armenia. I was 7 months old when this earthquake happened. My mother was at home with me. I was in my crib, and she heard this weird sensation, felt this weird sensation, realized it's an earthquake, took me out of my crib and ran outside. The building where our apartment was intact. We were able to maintain our home, but I do remember seeing a lot of rubbles when I was a tiny little kid. They're like these tiny little memories that you won't see this anymore, obviously, but I still do have these memories. We lived right across the street from a school, part of which was destroyed. I do remember that. I do remember a lot of construction too, 1988. So this devastated the country, devastated the people. And this is also when the Soviet Union is debilitating, declining. What happens? 1988, awful year for Armenians. The Soviet Union is declining. People are seeing kind of ways to declare independence from the Soviet Union, become independent states, and different movements start. Azerbaijan, ethnic Turks, want to get rid of Armenians. So what do? They deport Armenians, and they have massacres of Armenians in some cities of Azerbaijan where Armenians live. Again, remember, this was historic territories, right? So you will see Armenians in all of these places, right? They have lived there, who knows for how many generations. And during the Soviet Union, a lot of people had kind of free movement. They would be, I don't know, you graduate from university, then you were assigned a job in another Soviet state. It was very common. But so what happens is, in the city of Sumgait is where it started. Azeris would gather in mobs like this and go into Armenian homes, just like you hear from like having the star on the Jewish homes in Nazi Germany, kind of like that. The police were given the addresses of the Armenians living in town. They would go and terrorize them and kill them, publicly execute them. After that, the same happened in Baku. The same happened in Kirovabat. The same happened in many big cities of Azerbaijan, and Armenians were persecuted there as well. So then they were deported, and Armenians said, well, we're seeing that the Soviet Union is not going to do anything. The Soviets didn't do anything. They came 3 days late. There were already people dead and publicly executed. Who does that, right? And so what Armenians said is like, well, we don't want to live in Azerbaijan. And remember our beautiful Stalin. He gave Artsakh, you guys probably know this name as Nagorno-Karabakh. He gave that to Azerbaijan. So Armenians there, ethnic Armenians have lived there for centuries, said we do not want to be part of Azerbaijan. We are scared for our lives. This is our human right to be with our own country. So the Artsakh movement starts. The Artsakh movement starts and war breaks between Armenia and Azerbaijan. This is what was given to Azerbaijan along with this. This, during the Soviet times, this was systemically erased from Armenians. So even by 1988, there were not many Armenians living here, probably around 2,000 people in this whole area. So it was completely Azerified, if there is an expression like that. But here, ethnic Armenians. So war breaks between Armenia and Azerbaijan, and Armenia wins the war. It lasts for several years. And again, remember this year, this is when the country, Soviet Union declining, country saw the earthquake, complete earthquake that raised the north of Armenia, and then also war. It was a very, very difficult time to be in Armenia. But then the spirit, of course, we were like, we have to be united because we cannot live in terror constantly. So that was the consequences of the Artsakh movement. Armenia declares independence in 1991. I posted this symbolic picture of Lenin's statue being removed from the Republic Square, because the Republic Square was the Republic Square of the First Republic in 1918, right? So Armenia regains its identity back. It's not Soviet Armenia anymore. It's the Republic of Armenia. It's beautiful. I have some pictures for you that you can walk through with me. This is Yerevan, my city. This is downtown area. This is it's very beautiful, very European-like. And this is again some parts of Armenia that I just thought you might be interested to see. This used to be a temple. Again, overlooks Masis, Mount Ararat. This is Datev. You remember kids said that my name is not Tato, but Datevik. I bear the name of this church, and here is the legend. Datev in Armenian means God give wings. If you ever go to Armenia, please visit Datev. It's in the mountains, inaccessible. You cannot see it. So you have to go up and up and up, and Armenia is a very mountainous country. It's in the Caucasus, so it's very mountainous. And so people built this, and this used to be a university, a medieval university. And what happened was Armenia was a Christian state, and Persia was a pagan state. So Persians were invading Armenia constantly. This is close to the border with Iran. Iran used to be Persia. So this is close to the border with Iran. And Armenians did not want to subdue to Persians, so they preferred death over conversion of religion. So they did not want to not be Christian. So from these little windows that you would see, people would jump out, and they didn't want to become prisoners to Persians. So those who did not jump would constantly scream, "God give wings to you, God give wings to you." So that's one of the versions, but the better version is that it was built in such high land, such impossible place, that when you look at it, it looks like it's flying. So people said, "God give wings to you, church, to you, to fly to God," right? So those are the two versions of the legend of Tatev. That's where my name comes from. Tato is kind of a nickname. It's kind of like Libby to Elizabeth or Bob to Robert, right? So that's what my name is. And then 2020, of course, the pandemic, the whole world is in the pandemic. But what the whole world didn't quite notice is that there was also war between Armenia and Azerbaijan. In a pandemic, Azerbaijan attacks Armenia. It is, again, the same, what is internationally known as Nagorno-Karabakh region, what we say Artsakh. Azeris wanted, they claim territorial integrity, which is, again, it's just that some international law refers to it as that, but again, this is because of Stalin that this started. Armenians living here have never been part of independent Azerbaijan until 2020. Azerbaijan attacked, backed by Turkey, who is the second largest army of NATO, backed by Syrian mercenaries imported from Turkey, and backed by Israel. So basically, we were fighting a lot of countries. It was a devastating, devastating war. You can see that what we were able to maintain is this. Right now, Armenia is in a very precarious situation because in a very precarious situation because of this. We do not know what the future is because there are constant threats coming from here and the other side, which is Turkey. And we're kind of smooshed in between two dictatorships that have neo-Ottoman desires. And so this is devastating for Armenia. We do not know what will happen. I'm going to play a video and talk. This is kind of like what Armenia is right now. It's a tourism video, tourists coming to Armenia, just to kind of give you a sense of what it's like. Many people, when they hear about this war ended in November 9th of 2020 with devastating results. But we Armenians are resilient people. We always say our biggest foe was the Roman Empire. Where is it now? Our other biggest foe was the Assyrian Empire. There is no Assyria. Where is the Persian Empire? We're now good neighbors. Actually, Persia and Armenia get along well. And what about the Russian Empire? How about the Soviet Union? I don't know about the Ottoman Empire. All these empires came and went, but we stayed and we will stay. And with that, I want to end, I'm gonna cry. I want to end with a symbolic picture. This is the Pope and the Catholicus of Armenia. And you can see doves being set free toward Mount Ararat, very symbolic because that is something that we live by. So I want to make sure that you guys all know that we love who we are, and we've been here for ages, and we treasure our Christian identity and our names and our history. And I want all of you to always experience peace, to always be in a peaceful place. All right, I'll be done here, and I'll be happy to take any questions that you might have. I'll start sharing my screen, and I'll answer any questions. All right, 2 questions someone wrote. If you would unmute yourself or type, both of them are fine.
I see questions in the chat.